All right, let's solve those two problems that we discussed on mean. These are the examination problems, and both of them are from the same paper, Winter 2018. So the first problem is we have been given find the mean for the following data, and this is the table that they've given. And again, we have the jargons here: class interval and frequency. So whenever they give this class interval, that's your cue and hint that they're talking about group data. So that's the first hint. And before solving the problem, that is a pre-solving section, always read this question in the exam, take a minute to compile and compose what they're asking. And I've just kind of recapped the mental notes, what I would be doing before I solve this problem. The first thing is, what is the ask? The ask is we need to find the mean, which is the arithmetic mean. The second thing is, I've noticed that the given data type is a group data over here. And what is the mean by group data? We already seen in the previous episode. They're given the class intervals, and they're given the range, and they're given the frequency. So for example, if you assume that this is the marks of the student, there's a number of students over here in the denominator, and let's say this is the marks in the numerator. Okay, so what does that mean? 4 students in the class have got anywhere between 10 to 20. So it could be any marks less than 20 but greater than equal to 10. So the marks could be less than 20 but greater than equal to 10. That's what it means. So whenever we have this kind of a range where we don't know exactly what marks the student would have got, it could be anywhere. So that kind of data, when they give us in a group defined by the class interval, that's called as group data. And we see that they have given the class interval, meaning that these are different buckets of marks. And that's how we should understand that it's our hint that they're talking about group data. And the boundaries are also overlapping, meaning if you see the first class interval is 10 to 20, it ends at 20, the second one starts at 20. This one ends at 30 and the next one starts at 30. So this and this, this and this, this and this are same. That means the boundaries between two class intervals are overlapping. And we'll discuss more about that in the further topics. What does that mean in terms of overlapping boundary? And always, last but not the least, like how we are kind of assigning that, we're thinking that this could be the students and this could be the marks. We are just trying to personifying this by giving it a real-time example, and that's what you should do in exam also. So that kind of aligns, okay, these are the number of students and these are the marks and stuff like that. That way it really helps you to solve the problem. Now, how do we solve the problem? Okay, the best ways to solve the problem is just tabulate in a simple table all the values. Okay, what are the different values? This one is given to us, the class and the marks obtained. So this one is given, so you tabulate that first. Okay, and then what you do is, we know that we are going to talk about group data, which is a big range or defined by the class interval. So in that case, we know that we are going to calculate the mean using the midpoint formula. And how do we calculate the midpoint? We take the center point for each one of them. And the way that we take the center point for each one of them is we just add up these two numbers and divide it by 2. It is as good as taking the average, the mean of each class interval. So we're taking the average or mean of each class interval. Or you can think about it as a midpoint. So the midpoint for 10 to 20 is going to be 15. So we add those 10 plus 20 divided by 2, which is 30 by 2, and then we get 15. And so on and so forth. Like that we get this midpoint. This is your step number 1 to calculate the mean for group data, where you calculate the midpoint. And then we also have the number of students for each of the class interval, which is also given. This part also is given to us. So now how do we interpret now this? We know that 4 students have got marks between 10 to 20, and we assume that on an average that they have got 15. That's what we are assuming. So we are assuming that there are 4 students who have got an average 15 marks. There are 6 students on an average who have got 25 marks. There are 10 students who on an average have got 35 marks. We don't know exactly what marks they have got, but we are assuming to be on the safer side that let's assume that they have got exactly in the middle of the range or the average of this range, and we are assuming that. So that's your frequency of the students. And if you add this up, 4 plus 6 plus 10 plus 18 plus 9 plus 3, it gives us total 50 students, which is your denominator, the total frequency. If you add up here, if you see here, if you add up the frequency, that's your 50 over here. 1 this is equal to 50, and that gives you a denominator. And the numerator is nothing but when you multiply this. So total 4 students have got 15 marks. Let me just get rid of this 1 second. Okay. So we know that 4 students have got 15 marks. So what are the total marks? That means, like I said, I'm going to make 4 entries for 4 students. Each one has got 15 marks. So the way to calculate this is I'm going to add up this. So that means 4 students in total have got 60 marks. So basically I'm going to multiply these 2 rows, 15 into 4, 25 into 6, 35 into 10, 45 into 18, and so on and so forth to get these values. And then I'm going to add up these values to get my numerator. So 2060 is my numerator. That's your step 2. Okay. Now we have the numerator and we have the denominator. So this is your numerator. And the rest is very simple because you just need to calculate the mean. And if you really are interested in the formula, this is the formula that I've copied, where you can say mean of the group data is equal to sum of, in the bracket you can take the interval midpoint into frequency, which is what we did here, and divided by the sum of the frequency. I don't really think that you need to worry about these steps, and there is no marks for writing these steps of formula as long as you get any of this format right. You can write any formula. You can write this flavor, this flavor, this flavor, or you can directly start using the calculation and saying that I'm going to calculate the mean using the midpoint formula. That's completely okay. I don't think that's a big deal about it. Okay. So that way, what you do is you're taking the numerator, which is what this section is all about, the total values in the numerator. Okay. Over here. And the denominator is total number of students, which is in the orange color. I've already color coded it. So if you see the orange color here, 4 plus 6 plus 10, this part, which is 50, I've already color coded, that's your denominator. So we have the numerator here and we have the denominator here, and that comes to 2060 divided by 50, and the net value is 41.2. So the mean of this overall distribution, whatever they have given, right? If it's marks, then you can think on an average, all these students put together, they have got on an average 41.2 marks. That's what you understand. And that's how you calculate the mean for the group data. Just getting the midpoint is the first step, and rest is simple addition divided by the denominator or the frequency. Just keep that in mind. Okay, moving on. In the same exam, there's another problem where they ask you to calculate the mean for the following data, and they're given this data. And as a quick recall, this is the exact problem we took as an example when we did the previous episode on calculating the mean for group data. So if you want to check out how do we do that, you can check out my previous episode on calculating group data for the mean calculation. You'll see that I've solved this exam problem, but nevertheless, I'm going to just repeat the same steps here. So what we do is we have the given data. Again, they're given as class interval and frequency, and there are overlapping boundaries. So that's your cue. Since you have a range, that's your cue that it's talking about a group data. And that means I need to find the midpoint first. And the way to calculate the midpoint is simple. You just take the average of this range or the middle point of this, however you want to calculate. In the exam, you don't have to calculate these 2 steps. I've just put this for explanation. You can do a mental math saying that the midpoint for this is very simple. 0 and 10, it's 5. And you can start from this step in exam. There is no problem. So that's your first step, and you can directly start from this step if it helps. This was just for your reference. These 2 steps are for reference. You can easily skip if you want. Okay. And the frequency of students are already given here. So this is given. And this total number is going to be your denominator. And when you multiply these 2 numbers, 5 into 3 is 15. Then you multiply this 2. Then you multiply this 2. And then you multiply this 2. And then you multiply this 2. You get these numbers. And when you add up this, you get 440. That's your numerator. So now we have the numerator and we have the denominator. And it's the same stuff. So we have the numerator and we have the denominator, and the answer is 20. That means on an average, all the students would have got 22 marks. It would have still made that the distribution would have been like that. That's what it kind of means. And if it helps, some of the textbooks, right? If you see, I've created the table like this. Some of the textbooks would have created indifferently. They will go with this like this. They'd say, okay, what's your class interval? And then what's your midpoint? So instead of putting in a row format, they would have gone this way. So if that helps, you can do that way also. I've just put it this way because the exam question came in this row format where you have this row and then this row, and then I just kept on building the rows below. So if you want to switch it and do it in the column format, that's also fine, whatever works. And that's how you calculate the mean for group data. And typically in the exam, you will get only the group data. I think there's only one instance for 2 marks where they asked to calculate the mean for ungrouped data, and that's very simple. I think I should have covered that also, but I'll try to put it in the next video. But in that case, there is no midpoint. You just calculate, add up all the sum and then divide it by the denominator. That's what it is. So that should be a wrap up on calculating mean, and in the next video we'll come up with a new topic. I'll see you then.